Blackhawks fans, welcome in to the Four Feathers podcast. It's season 6, episode 7. We're building some character today. It's Johnny Nani alongside my guy, Tony Marchese, here to discuss a recent stretch of Blackhawks hockey. Take a look at what's on tap next. Tony, how you doing this Monday?
Johnny, doing well. It was a great weekend for the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm sure you would agree with that statement, but good to be back. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Riding high off some victories, back-to-back slate in Southern California, picking up a couple of wins. We'll discuss a bunch of takeaways from that and the kind of back half of that road trip that Ron and I had previewed on our previous episode. So, yeah, I mean, it always feels better when you win. Winning cures a lot of things, and we're going to get into that and just what that means for this team in general as we go forward. Before we jump in, dive in heavy hitting topics here. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet. There, give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Okay, as we jump in, Tony, back half of this road trip started off with a game they probably should have won, but ended up losing to the San Jose Sharks, which is a weird one. But as I mentioned, you go and sweep that Southern California slate. In that Saturday game, probably didn't deserve to win. They found a way to gut it out. And Sunday, despite kind of being outplayed numbers-wise, didn't really feel like they were ever out of control of that game. So your thoughts, initial takeaways here.
Obviously, Thursday is the game you want back. It's on our tracker now, Johnny. I know we sort of talked about this one. I think I texted you and Ronald after the conclusion of Thursday night's game, and I said, when are you allowed to get frustrated with this team? I was down on the Blackhawks on Thursday night, big time. Didn't like what I saw. Definitely a game that this team should win. We obviously want to see the Hawks beat teams that they're supposed to beat. Already have a victory over San Jose in the home opener. Thought this one was going to be a pretty easy game for the Hawks. So I was very, very frustrated Thursday night. I think a lot of people were, but I had really no hope going into the weekend just with that loss. And obviously they proved me wrong. But, they stayed in this game, just weren't able to get over the hump. I believe they controlled puck possession for pretty much the entire third period, just were unsuccessful in finding the back of the net. And that's what probably left a bad taste in my mouth, if I'm being honest with you, was just seeing how unlucky they felt as they were controlling the play there. And the frustration with Connor Bedard not being able to find the back of the net, things just didn't feel good. As you entered the weekend, Saturday's game started out, I was just as frustrated as I was on Thursday for the first two periods of hockey. Pleasantly surprised once we got to the third period. I think that I think that if Ron and I had bet the money line on like we normally do, we probably would have a couple extra dollars in our sportsbooks accounts right now, but nonetheless did not do that after the showing on Thursday. Just not a lot of faith. But the one takeaway I have from this game, and I'm sure we'll get to it in a minute, I feel like that's the first time in a long time that the Hawks have scored with the goalie pulled late in a game. That it tends to go the other way. It leads to an empty netter for the Hawks all the time, and you just kind of feel let down at the end of the night. But Saturday afternoon game, I think maybe it was just a bit of a slow start for them, but they were able to battle back and win this one. And obviously Sunday, that might have been the best 60 minutes of hockey I've seen this team play all season. So we're here on a high note today on Monday. Johnny, any thoughts from you on these games?
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up the San Jose, and I agree with the result of, obviously, of course, you're frustrated. A lot of people were frustrated, but when I go and look at that effort, they dominated in terms of, possession, and I think they just got too cute with it at the end. They were overpassing, in my opinion. I know there were a decent amount of shot attempts. Then you had Bedard hitting like the shaft of the goalie stick a couple of times. If one of those goes in, maybe we're talking about a different result on Thursday night, but it was scary hours late on Halloween night on Thursday. You were right, but I was more concerned Saturday in the early to middle stages of that game. And I was like, wow, well, I expected the Kings to, they're a better team than the Hawks just on paper. And I expected them to control, but the way that they looked so lifeless wasn't like this was the second half of a back-to-back. This was the opener of their weekend back-to-back. And the way that they were getting dominated so thoroughly, looked like they didn't have any pushback even. But then you get that Foligno scrap at the end of the first period. It didn't translate immediately. But then in the third period, as you mentioned, they started brewing a rally together. And once you see one go in, it can just change the whole mindset and swing momentum back in your favor. And that's exactly what happened. Shout out to Ryan Donato for really driving things. He was the one that set up that with the goalie pulled the extra attacker on. He set up Tyler Bertuzzi's equalizer late in that game, and then obviously won it in the shootout. It was good to see all three shooters take advantage of a goalie like Darcy Kemper, who is susceptible in the shootout. So if you get to that skills competition, guess what? Our skill won out. So that was fun to see. And then Sunday, like it's my biggest thing, like when I have notes for this, they were outshot, but not outplayed in Sunday's game. And it felt like they were able to divert most of Anaheim's good looks. And, they protected the house well, the area around the goal. And then Arvid Soderblom, we're going to get to him too, but 37 saves on 39 shots. That's huge. And guess what? When you get outshot in, regular in 5-on-5, even strength, so to say, special teams become all that more important in what they do. Go 2 for 2 on the power play, 4 for 5 on the penalty kill, and it would have been a perfect 5 for 5 if not for that goal in like the last 10 seconds that Anaheim was able to put on while they were on the power play, and then had an extra attacker on top of it. So overall, I leave this feeling encouraged as they come back home. They have a couple of days to regroup, maybe get some personnel back in here in terms of Alec Martinez, Laurent Brossoit. We'll see what their updates are Tuesday, but overall, I'm feeling good. And as Mr. El Capitan had said, we're building some character here. He said it took more character to win the Sunday game even than the Saturday one, even though they had to mount the ferocious comeback in Saturday's game. And I tend to agree with him because that's tough when you're on the road. End of a 5-game road trip. It's been over a week and they've been on the road, and they buckled down, got it done. Like I said, executed their special teams there, which is attention to detail. And they still had it at the very end of this long road trip. And that is an encouraging sign for the Blackhawks.
It really is, Johnny. And I agree with what Nick Foligno says here. Didn't really think that, a back-to-back here against two, fairly decent opponents was going to be easy for the Hawks to grab a win in both of these games. I thought maybe we'd get one. I know you and Ron did the predictions on the preview slate for this, but I didn't have the opportunity as I was not on that show. I probably would have guessed maybe a 1-2 showing here with the Sharks being the one game that they had won. And this is backwards from what I would have predicted had I been on these airwaves when you guys were talking about this upcoming slate. So I think the back-to-back Saturday, Sunday victories is going to be a huge potential jumping off point for this hockey team to go in there and prove that they can do it. Not only was it, back-to-back wins, but you had Arvid Soderblom in net for Sunday's game. And looked great. I know you just read off there 37, 39. He's now put together some pretty impressive starts. And I believe he's gotten 2 so far this season. Mrazek's carried most of the workload, 3 for Soderblom. 2 of these he's looked really, really good in, at least the 2 that I've watched. I must have missed the one game that he started in that I can't recollect here right now off the top of my head. But
Buffalo, second home game.
Buffalo. Okay. Yeah. He's looked good, man. I don't know about you. I think that there's probably a good chance he goes back down to Rockford, but I'd like to see him get another start or 2 here if possible before Brossoit comes back. And I think he's earned that with his play so far this season.
I would imagine that's going to happen at some point here, Tony, because you got a back-to-back coming up. I know we'll do our regular, preview and predictions at the end of the show, but you do have a back-to-back coming up Wednesday at home, Thursday on the road at Dallas. I would imagine he gets the back half of that because while Brossoit should be close to returning, and while he may very well join morning skate and be close to being activated off that injured non-roster list. I don't know if they'll throw him right into the fire there, because then they'll have a little bit more time after those games, come back home, settle down for Sunday against Minnesota. And I feel like that may be an opportunity for, if they were going to send down Arvid Soderblom, do it after the back-to-back slate. So we'll see, but props to him. I think we'll have a little bit more on him later in the show. And I just had one more Foligno quote, because the Blackhawks posted a graphic of it and said, "It matters to know how to find ways to win. You're not going to play your best every night, but if you can find a way to win, you're growing as a group." I think that's a perfect summation of it, and what we saw in terms of both results and effort level, attention to detail, all that stuff lumped into one, and obviously makes it much better when you get the result, as he is talking about in his quote there. But overall, you have to be satisfied with, even with some of the losses that were sprinkled in there against San Jose, against Dallas at the beginning of the road trip. Even in that game, they started to mount a little comeback and just couldn't get the full momentum going in that very first game of the road trip. So I'm with Mr. Captain on this one, and I think they are, getting back towards where they need to be.
Yeah, and one thing that we've talked about a lot on here throughout this rebuild process is sort of the moral victory stuff. And I know that Foligno has touched on this in a couple of comments as well. You mentioned it right at the top of the show. Winning cures a lot of things. And so it's good to see the end result here for these guys, so that the frustration doesn't build, because this could have been, I think, a lot tougher of a situation right out of the gate. I know not a lot of people are happy 100% with the start that this team has had this year, but when you start to stack a couple of wins together, it really sort of takes that pressure off of the team. And there were comments made today, I believe, to Ben Pope by Kyle Davidson about Luke Richardson's job. And we talked a little bit about this last time you and I were on here. We don't want that in the press. I don't know about you, but I don't want to sit here and have storylines of Luke Richardson being on the hot seat 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the season because the losses start to pile up. It's good to see the results, Johnny, and I'm happy that we can start to put some of that to bed with Davidson's comments, and hopefully the winning continues so that this stuff doesn't have to be questioned, because it's always doom and gloom, especially in the city of Chicago right now with the state of sports. This is the one team right now, and save me from talking about the Chicago Bears from any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, that's not what I want to be doing here, but you want to see this thing get on track. The talk with Elliot Friedman, talking about Connor Bedard and the growing frustrations, and when does losing become part of the DNA, down to the Luke Richardson conversation. They need to sprinkle in wins like they did this past weekend to keep sort of that trajectory and that hope alive for this rebuild. It's good for PR. And as you said, I'll go back to it and we'll say it over and over again. Winning cures everything. You want to see this team stacking wins together, regardless if they're going to make the playoffs or not. I think it's just healthy for this group to sort of take that next step that Davidson talked about in the offseason, to be better than they were last year. And I know that the start wasn't as good as what it could have been, but it's nice to see things start to come together and then build some character, as this episode is so aptly named.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Luke Richardson in there, this is not a Chicago Bears show, so I don't even want to go down that route of it. You're always going to have impatient fans, and I think that's something Davidson acknowledged in his interview with Ben Pope that you had referenced earlier. But I just want to have a few quick tidbits tactically on Luke Richardson. I've enjoyed his lineup decisions that he has made, and I think he has pressed some of the right buttons that have gotten this team going in the right direction now. The lineup adjustments, putting Isaac Phillips, letting him make his season debut against LA, coming in for this back-to-back weekend slate in place of a struggling TJ Brody, who is still trying to get off of the Leafs man-to-man mentality and come over and play the Blackhawks zone, which they have established. Okay. But it's not, the results on the ice weren't good. So guess what? You give it to a guy who's been waiting around. He hasn't, he played like 2 games in Rockford, just been waiting around, sitting in the press box, has gotten called up because Alec Martinez isn't ready to go yet. And what does he do? He responds by scoring a goal. in his second game of the season there. Other than that, ride the hot hand, right? Ryan Donato gets moved up to the top line. You drop Teuvo Teravainen down to the third line, which is still acceptable for him because he's an excellent two-way player. He's good, responsible defensively. So then you add that little offensive flair that Donato is currently bringing right now. You didn't think you'd say that at the beginning of the season, but guess what? Hockey's a crazy game. Ryan Donato's got the hot stick right now. You put him up there and good things are happening. He was, an extra attacker in that situation, as I mentioned on Saturday. Other than that, people complaining still about Lucas Reichel being relegated to the fourth line. And guess what? He's on power play 1. That gives him some time with Connor Bedard in an opportunity with more time and space. And you're getting favorable matchups. You're in the offensive zone, and he has been able to flash in terms of getting some assists. I know he got a goal even strength in the Monday game against Colorado, but overall, I have to commend Luke Richardson's recent lineup decisions while we were on that topic. Tony, I think you had something on a player who's gripping the stick a little hard right now. Connor Bedard. Let's go talk about him.
Yeah, it's been tough, Johnny. And I know we talked about this a little bit about a week ago, and you said the floodgates are going to open. I think he got one since that time, but you saw a couple of chances for Bedard throughout this road trip here that probably could have been highlight reel goals. I know the one that everybody's going to go to is in overtime on Saturday. Beautiful toe drag move. Just barely misses putting that thing top shelf. You can see the visible frustration on his face when he gets back to the bench, sort of slouches in on it. But he is
sticks too,
yeah, snapping sticks. Do it. You don't like seeing your star player frustrated. I do believe that once he starts scoring, it's going to be sort of game over. He's going to have at least a week, 2 week, 3 week stretch where he sort of takes this offense over. And we saw it for stretches last year. So the ability is 100% there. It's at this moment, you're just not finding the back of the net. He's still finding ways to be productive. And I think that that's important here. He leads the team in assists, still has put up 12 points. I know I've had this conversation with Ron. He's probably going to listen to this and laugh because I said I was sort of concerned when I spoke with him about Connor Bedard and the lack of finding the back of the net. And I asked Ron if he was concerned, and he sort of read off the same stats that I'm reading off right now. But Johnny, I don't know about you. I want to see the goals come too on top of everything else he's doing. I'm glad he's still productive. I want to see the goals. I want to see the highlight reel goals. We came very, very close multiple times this weekend. What's it going to take? I don't know how to fix this right now. I saw you tweet something the other day, and I'm wondering if you're going to go there.
Yeah, use the wicked release that he has on his little wrist/snapshot. He tried to get very cute and I think kind of just lay it in 5-hole when he had a little mini breakaway opportunity against the Ducks in Sunday's game. Whereas if he would have, maybe faked once towards the backhand, but not commit fully to it and then come back to the forehand and rip glove high, I think he could have gone bar down and scored on that. He had enough time and space. I don't think the defender was collapsing quickly enough on him to take away that with a poke check or a stick lift. So I would recommend using that, although I know there is some, you probably have a scouting report on a goalie and you say if he's slow to close his pads in there, then you may want to try the 5-hole there. I think he was just trying to get too cute with it, and he's got an otherworldly wrist shot. He uses a very flexible stick. Utilize that kind of stuff because we've seen it. It wasn't a complete full on wrist shot in his last goal that he scored, which was not this past Friday, but the Friday before against Nashville, right? But he flew to the slot and just able to open his blade and use that little flex on his stick to elevate the puck and get it past UC Saros, very good goalie for the Nashville Predators there. I think he can start utilizing that more. That's would be my tactical adjustment to get him out of it. But other than that, keep shooting the puck. Keep don't pass it up. Just I know the assists are piling on right now, as you mentioned some of the numbers there, and he did have 3 assists in Sunday's game, which is great. He's still creating chances for teammates, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity for that. But he can't just say, "Oh, I'm not going to shoot it. It's not going in for me right now." You still got to do it. What's the old basketball saying? If you're not hot, shoot till you get hot. Well, that's my advice for Connor Bedard.
Yeah, I'm not sure where he finished last season in terms of shooting percentage, but 6.7 right now feels non-Connor Bedard like.
Yeah,
I would imagine this sort of uh, gets back to the mean here at some point. You know that they're going to have to fall for him as long as he stays on the ice and healthy. But um, you can't argue with the 12 points so far. Leads the team.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll see what happens.
I mean,
But I
you can still dish it. You can still dish it with the best of them, man. So I mean, he's going to have, especially on power play one. It helps when your teammates' shots are going in. It was a very nice shot by Seth Jones from the left circle that Connor had set up along with Lucas Reichel in Sunday's game against Anaheim. But like I said, maybe if he does opt for the snap or the wrist shot on that partial break, maybe we're talking about a goal in last night's game as well. So I think it'll come, man. I thought it was going to say, floodgates will open. Wasn't exactly right on that. He's still, like I said, gripping it a little tight right now, but he's too skilled for that low shooting percentage to last. And I hate to, rain on a parade of a guy like Ryan Donato, but on the conversely, the 30 point some shooting percentage that Ryan Donato has is also not sustainable, and that will come back down to earth. He'll still get his greasy goals because he's showing a willingness to go to those areas, right? But you have to take into account sample size when we're talking about these early season numbers.
What about Isaac Phillips' 100 shooting percentage, Johnny? Do you feel that can last? Will it hold?
I mean, it'd be great. That'd be awesome if he'd be like the first player in NHL history to shoot I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's been done for like a guy that, was only in for one game. I want to say maybe Steven Stamkos in the 2021 Stanley Cup final was 100% because he only played one game. Came in off the bench and scored in that. But yeah, it's an unheard of feat. That'd be hilarious if it did. But yeah, I don't know. And you wonder how much run Isaac Phillips is going to get too when you're talking about a guy like that. But good plug and play option. Like I mentioned, I thought it was a good decision on Luke Richardson's part to bring him into the lineup there. So I wouldn't be concerned about Connor Bedard. The frustration is going to be there. It's going to be evident because he's a very, very, very competitive player. And I think it's a good thing to have that edge to you. Obviously, it boils over when things aren't going in the net, but he is too skilled for it not to happen. So I think the perfect time for it is on national TV with the Red Wings in town on Wednesday for a real highlight reel goal to take place. So the TNT intermission crew can drool over it. Maybe, Biz brings out some ridiculous prop or something.
I wouldn't be opposed to that happening. I know that, the Red Wings in town is always a premier game. It's good to show up in the big moments. I think that that would go a long way for Connor Bedard to end some of the frustration, to have a nice little highlight reel goal, maybe early in this one. Let's not wait around first or second period.
Yeah,
get one quick.
Yeah, I just had a couple of, while we're on takeaways from this road trip, before we get into our regular segments, I just had to, shout out Ryan Donato, because we talk about him frequently on the show, as Ron and I are, to some of his supporters dating back to last season. I'm not saying we have a monopoly on the Ryan Donato fan club, but it's a guy who
stake your claim.
He's just the thing is, he always had the mentality, and now he's got the physical adjustments that he was able to make over the course of his summer. A big knock on his game previously was that he was a below average skater. Well, guess what? He's still not an elite skater, but he made tactical adjustments in terms of feet and knee placement to be able to stride more quickly. And he has credited that to some of the rush chances that he's gotten. He has credited that to beating some guys to the puck in the front of the net, which is another aspect of his game that not every player can do, right? We're not expecting Connor Bedard to be in there jamming away at rebounds, right? But Ryan Donato can do it, and he can get slashed in the face and still put that puck into the back of the net, as we saw Monday against the Colorado Avalanche, as we saw Saturday against the Dallas Stars last week. And, we saw it in Sunday's game here against the Anaheim Ducks. That could have been one that could have went to Bedard. I know they were both in the area, but guess what? Ryan Donato was able to maneuver his way, get the stick blade in there and put it on. So he's on a heater. I'm going to enjoy it while it lasts. Like I said, that shooting percentage isn't going to be sustained throughout the year. but he has the right mentality and he has made physical adjustments to be worthy of a first line spot on this team as it goes right now. Will that last all season either? Probably not. But for right now, good for him. And I'm glad that Luke Richardson's given him the opportunity.
I wanted to take the time to ask you this question, Johnny, because I think it's important knowing that, this isn't going to be 100% sustainable from Ryan Donato, but he's a guy that's going to need a contract rather soon. Where do you see Ryan Donato winding up? Do you believe that he's going to be with this team long term? Is he going to be trade deadline, potential move guy? What do you want from Ryan Donato? What would you prefer as the Hawks fan? And then what do you think is actually going to happen? Is he a candidate for an early season extension? Is he definitely gone via trade? I'm curious to what you're going to predict here, because I love the Nostradamus predictions. So I'm curious as to what you have here.
So we're still just, in the early days of the month of November. So another month plus will give us a much better picture of exactly what the plans are there. And I don't think any roster decisions, whether that be extension or it be we're going to trade this guy, are set in stone in anybody's mind, from Kyle Davidson down to Luke Richardson to Ryan Donato. He probably doesn't know either. But obviously, when you see runs like this, you're like, oh, yeah, it'd be great to have him around. And he's a great player to have. But when you go and look at it in the long-term scheme of things, as of right now, and where from the beginning of the season, I never expected the Blackhawks to be even a fringe playoff team. I was thinking somewhere more towards middle of the pack, right? I think that's where they're destined to finish, just given the talent that is on this team and the talent that is still to come, and that will still need ripening when they do get here from their ripening that's going on in Rockford. And you have guys that will need that time, some Landon Slaggerts of the world. Frank Nazar is looking like he's forcing his way up from the A. Once again, I don't think it'll happen until the back half of the season, but how do you create room for those guys? You trade away hot commodities, guys on expiring deals. And if you had to ask me right now, under my head, that's what you have to make a decision right now. Ryan Donato's gone at the trade deadline, probably for a more handsome price than you ever imagined, though.
Well, if the goals keep piling up, obviously I don't think the shooting percentage is going to stay at 30, but he's going to be an attractive piece at the deadline for a competing team that's looking to make a deep playoff run. A guy that's been putting the puck in the back of the net. And his stats just jump off the chart at you right now. Obviously, it's still a little bit a small sample size theater, but I would think he's probably traded. He's going to be a tough guy to see go, though, at least for me, Johnny. And I had a feeling you were going to say he is probably on his way out of here. But that said, this roster construction is a little bit different than last year. There's more vets here on a little bit longer deals than what we've seen over the past few seasons. So I can see where Ryan Donato is going to be an attractive piece to move. That said, I think he's quietly becoming one of those fan favorite guys. So it's going to be another one of those little bit of a tough pill to swallow if your prediction comes true.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's, kind of like, think back to the Sam Lafferty's of the world, right? We loved his hashtag grit, fire, passion, TW, all that. Ryan Donato.
Why is it always that guy that moves?
Yeah, he brings, because teams are looking to add that little layer of tenacity when it comes down to playoff hockey time. That's why they are hot commodities. I mean, shoot, even before he came to the Blackhawks, think the Maple Leafs, when they were trying to secure their bottom six depth, they acquired a Colin Blackwell type, right? Those players can be it's not always the answer or whatever, but it can be a key piece of the puzzle for a team that's looking to put it all together and make a run. And like I said, you just got to be realistic with yourself. The Blackhawks aren't making a push for the playoffs. It'd be great if they, exceeded all expectations and did go on an absolute heater and were, there. But I would think that they're just not there in terms of their timeline for trajectory to competitiveness right now. And Ryan Donato would be someone that, like I said, would now fetch you a much bigger haul than you would ever even initially anticipate for a guy like him. So that would be, probably too enticing to pass up just with where they are in their competitive cycle or rise to it, so to say.
I don't want to play, trade deadline predictions right now here at this juncture in November. But when you say much higher price than what you can imagine, are you thinking draft capital or actual player prospects?
Yeah,
What are you just thinking a little bit here?
Right. That I would say the draft picks would be higher than you had initially thought. There's going to be a team out there that's probably, instead of, a lot of the deals can be packaged a seventh and a fourth or what have you. You may be looking at a second to third in that regard. And if not, it also depends on how else Kyle Davidson wants to acquire this talent among the forward group, right? Like I'd mentioned a few names that are in Rockford. Obviously, we know Frank Nazar, highly billed prospect. Where does Landon Slaggert fit into your long-term plans? Is someone like Sam Savoie pushing the envelope because he could be, your cheap young sort of replacement, so to say, for that skill set of player, similar to Donato, maybe not as much skill in terms of the shooting, but the willingness to go to the hard areas, stuff like that. And then, there's already, Moran and I brushed over it a little bit last week, but there's already the early season kind of rumblings. I wouldn't even call them rumors yet, but just rumblings from your David Pagnotas of fourth period and Elliot Friedman on Sportsnet. And, the Blackhawks and the, whatever other teams are looking to acquire young center depth, right? And you look at the second line center role right now, you got Nick Foligno temporarily filling it, basically placeholder until Frank Nazar gets here. Well, what does Davidson actually want to do with that? And if he is then looking to acquire it via trade, then maybe Donato is a piece that goes along with a draft pick to someone else if you're getting a high upside younger player at that point. But it would also take the perfect scenario. It takes two to tango on those. So it would be a team having to be willing to give up that type of player for a more win now sort of asset at that point. So be interesting to see. We're a long ways away from it, but that would just be my initial inclination right now.
That's what I thought. I wasn't sure what you were going to say here, but I had a feeling it was going to be the trade route. And again, something that we'll have to keep an eye on as the season rolls on. But kind of tough to judge who's even going to be in the market at this moment. We know who some of those teams will be, but I think that there's still a little bit of shaking out to do in the NHL standings before we can identify even targets as to where Ryan Donato could potentially end up.
Right.
Who knows? But it could be an interesting trade center this year, Johnny.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I'd say for right now, though, just enjoy it. Like I said, enjoy the hot hands. Sometimes it's just sure, it'd be great if Connor Bedard was scoring goals every single game and making the highlight reel. But it shows the makeup of this group that they can get contributions and be happy for each other when another guy is the hot hand at the moment. So enjoy it. For right now, that'd be my advice to Blackhawks fans. We're not even at the the Thanksgiving. American Thanksgiving is usually our check-in point for if a team is destined for the playoffs or not. It's just historically in the NHL. So we got a few more weeks. Let's see if this thing can keep going in terms of Ryan Donato. And then obviously you want to get Connor Bedard off the goal schneid here. Obviously still piling up points, but we'll see. Maybe returning back home can help do it. Get some favorable matchups with that second change as we move forward here. All right. Roster notes. Alec Martinez still on IR. Laurent Brossoit still on injured non-roster. We will see if there's any updates that come about. They were, both potentially going to join the road trip. That never panned out. So I would imagine there'd be more on that when Luke Richardson talks Tuesday. They have practice Wednesday morning skate. But for the immediate future, Tony, that kind of brings us to where our stick taps lead. And with Laurent Brossoit out, Peter Mrazek's been getting the heavy load in net, but now you look at a performance like Sunday night, 37 saves on 39 shots. Both of our stick taps are going to Mr. Arvid Soderblom. Go ahead.
Yes, they are. I mean, I sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but we got to give credit where credit is due, Johnny. And credit is 100% due right now to Arvid Soderblom. This was a guy that we just rode last year. I mean, memes, jokes. I think I came on here talking about how I never wanted to see him again. He was the punching bag for a lot of things last year. And the improvements have been noticeable. And that's something that I think is really awesome to see. I don't know if he's your long-term goalie for the Chicago Blackhawks. There's still a terrible track record that precedes all of everything that's been done so far this season. But just looking at his stats real quick, Johnny, it's important to note 927 save percentage. Yes, it's on 3 starts, but Peter Mrazek, 300 shots on him. Arvid Soderblom has carried a pretty decent load of shots, 96 shots against so far in those 3 games. I don't know if the defense just plays a little bit differently in front of Peter Mrazek than they do Arvid Soderblom, but it looks like Arvid's catching a little bit more of a workload so far in his starts versus what Mrazek has, but he's your save percentage leader. He's got a goal against average 2.35 right now through those 3 starts. Very close to 2 shutouts so far already this season, Johnny. And that's impressive for a guy that just last year it did not look like this team could win a game with him in net. And so far they've looked competitive with him in net this season. Major stick tax to Arvid Soderblom here, man. I'm surprised. I'm honestly surprised. I don't know about you.
Yep, I am as well. I would have hoped that there would have been some improvement over the summer because there were some mechanical issues in terms of his push-offs and positioning and visualization. I think that's something that, people ask, well, how does this turnaround happening? How does it? Well, I would like to credit Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times, who had talked about, when I mentioned visualization, and it's going, and it was something that Arvid himself had said, with working with Jimmy Waite, right, in the goaltending coach, is visualizing the play ahead of you, going and making sure you take a look so you have a view of what the attackers are doing, where they're positioned, who you're, in KYP, as Stacey King would say on the Bulls broadcast, know your personnel. You got a big shooter on the left, left circle, so you may have to cheat to your right a little bit, right? Things like that. And he said that has helped the game slow down for him. And that's huge because goalie is a reactionary position. So if it slows down for you in terms of how you're processing it, then you are more likely to be able to make the save, add in the better positional adjustments that he has made this year compared to last season. And you are seeing the fruits of that in terms of the results, which is excellent to see because process is great. We heard all last year that he was working with Jimmy Waite and they're really working through this. I think it was something that needed to happen with reps continually over the summer, and reps that would not, if they ended up in the back of your net, is going to make your team lose a game. Right. So, right. Credit to him for the work he put in over the season. You can tell just in terms of his awareness, his positioning, that that work is paying off right now. And it's, like I said, stick taps, like I said, on the forward front for Ryan Donato for making those adjustments physically. Arvid Soderblom, both physically and mentally in this case, which is huge for a goalie. You need it all, be able to put it together. And hey, I thought this was going to be a little bit disastrous with Laurent Brossoit. He's signed as your backup goalie, and everybody was excited about that. You're like, oh yeah, no more Soderblom right now. And it's like, now I'm worried about Laurent Brossoit being rusty when he comes back from his knee surgery, right? And you send Arvid Soderblom down, and are the first couple Laurent Brossoit games going to be stinkers? Who knows? We'll see. We'd still have an injury update on him, but we hope to soon.
I agree. Hand up right here. I was one of the people that really celebrated the Brossoit signing just because I didn't want to see any Arvid Soderblom this year. Yeah, I talked about this in a key getting out of the gate on our season preview show is you're going to have to weather the storm through these. They've so far, and again, this can change with one start, but so far the Arvid Soderblom starts feel, at least to me, like they're competitive and they're staying right in there. In fact, he's been keeping the team in those games to an extent early on by making plenty of great saves. So, man, I can't give a bigger stick tap so far this season than from what we've seen out of Arvid Soderblom. And I hope this continues because that would just be a positive development regardless. Even if he goes down to the AHL, plays well down there. It's nice to see that, like, if there is another goalie injury or what have you, that you've got somebody that seems to be doing a little bit better than what he was last year. It just sets the tone better, Johnny, when you've got a goaltender that you don't feel like is going to go in there and have a terrible fucking start.
Yeah. Yep, it's all there. So I agree. Stick taps go to Arvid Soderblom from both of us this week. Okay, let's move on to what's on tap next as we take a look at the Blackhawks' upcoming 3 games here. We'll run it back with our predictions tracker. An update on this, Tony. I'm on the board. You were not on the show last. You were not on the show last week. It was Ron and I. Ron said 2-0-1 versus San Jose, LA, and Anaheim. I had said 2-1-0. That's exactly how it went down. I predicted they were going to beat San Jose, lose to LA. That was flipped. But the Anaheim win stands there, and all that matters is the record here. So, boom, I'm on the board with 1 point here. You're in the lead with 2. Ron's got 1, and I am now on the board with 1. So, with that, we'll take a look at these upcoming games. We'll do a little preview, make some predictions. Wednesday at home against Detroit, 7 p.m. That's a nationally televised game. TNT, True TV, stream on Max. Thursday will be at Dallas, back-to-back here, 7 o'clock on Chicago Sports Network. And then a couple days off before Sunday, one of those great 6 o'clock starts back at the UC. Get some Minnesota Wild on Chicago Sports Network. What are you thinking for this upcoming slate of games?
This is tough. Dallas is a pretty decent hockey team. Minnesota seems to give the Blackhawks fits lately.
And they're off to a hot start.
I want to say 2-1 here because I want to see the recent trend continue. But it would be really easy for me to say 1-2. But I think I'm going to stick with my gut. I'm going to be there Sunday against Minnesota. And I want to see them beat Detroit. I think Dallas is going to be tough, but I think Sunday provides you at one of those great 6 o'clock starts a good chance to bounce back in front of the home crowd if things are a little tough. So I want the 3-game win streak. I'm just going to try and speak this into existence. 2-1. 2-1.
All right. This is tough just with the Dallas and Minnesota on there. Like I mentioned, Minnesota is off to a hot start to the season. We've already seen Dallas once. You would hope that they can make some adjustments there, but being on the second leg of a back-to-back, and this is interesting, the second time that they're playing them, it's on the road again, and it's the second half of a back-to-back for the Hawks there. I can't bring myself to predict a win in that, so I'll go with the win against the Red Wings at home. That'd be nice. So 1 there. Loss at Dallas against Minnesota. You're going to be there. You already said 2-1-0. I'll reverse it. I'll go 1-2. I think you can still maintain some of this momentum, though, with how you play. And even with a 1-2-0 record in this stretch, you could still continue building some of this character, but you're just getting into a little bit tougher portion of the schedule. Even Detroit, we like to look at it and say, oh yeah, that'd be a win. And of course we want to predict that it's a rivalry game, but they're a team with playoff aspirations. They're off to a up and down, little Jekyll and Hyde start to their season, so they need to kick it into gear. A little urgency there. You got the Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane returns. It's tough to predict here, but for the sake of differences and just looking at, like I said, it's tough on the back-to-back against Dallas, and Minnesota's been, just lighting it up a little bit so far, at least from the highlights that I've seen from them. So I'll go 1-2-0 on this one.
I really wanted to go 1-2-0 myself. I think that there's a pretty decent possibility this team could go 0-3 in this slate, just with the opponents that are lined up here. But I'm trying to speak it into existence, Johnny. I want to keep the good vibes rolling, and I do like the thought that they can keep the momentum through the strong play. But at the end of the day, man, you want those wins, and hopefully I'm right, man. Hopefully I'm right. I'm just gonna say it. I want to be right here. I want to get another point up on this board, but I think you've got the safer play by far.
Yeah, and another thing that factors in this for me too, selfishly, I'm behind in the standings. I know I'm tied with Ron there now that I have 1 point, but I'd said I was getting too cute with it because I think in a previous episode I predicted like an overtime loss in there. Ron can do that stuff and get away with it because he'll predict it and it'll happen. Whenever I do it, it doesn't. So I just got to go and look at it objectively for right here, at least until I get back into this mix here, at least tied with you here for the leaderboard, and then we can maybe go a little more exotic with my predictions in terms of overtime losses or 3-0 stretches possibly. We'll see.
Yeah, hey man, this is a competition in of itself. So I feel like I'm a little out there on this one, but we'll see what happens. Stranger things have happened, but I might have gotten a little too cute with it. Hopefully not.
Yeah, one thing that I did, I like to do the 1-2. Oh, if I'm going to be there, I like to predict it as a win, because obviously you don't go up there to the United Center expecting a loss. But that was the Vancouver game we were at, and as we were like sitting there looking at it, we're like, okay, yeah, we probably could have predicted this one as a loss coming into this one, just given their skill set versus ours and the way that they were playing there. So it's always quite the interesting decision when we have to do these predictions. But nonetheless, Tony, I'm excited for the first game of the year against the Red Wings. I wish that it was still a rivalry that was in division and we're playing them all the time. That's not the case anymore. So you got to savor these when they're only twice a year.
Yes, you do. And I'm right there with you that I wish that this was still a rivalry where these teams would meet a lot more often. We'll see what the NHL eventually does with it. I would think that you have to bring it back at some point, Johnny, don't you? You've got to bring this back at some point.
You would imagine, depending on expansion, if those would modify divisions, conferences at all. But that, unfortunately, I think that's years down the road, and it's going to continue as is for now. So in the meantime, it'll always be great to have Patrick Kane back. It still pains me to see him wearing the winged wheel on his chest, but that was a career choice. They paid him, and it was also a Davidson choice on our end there. So we can sit here, be sour about it, or we could appreciate him for all the great things that he did and give him a little cheer when he comes back. And I elect to do the latter route.
I heard that there's a rumor going around that Four Feathers podcast enforcer Patrick Comiskey might be in the house just to see his boy Patrick Kane there on Wednesday. So if you see a roaming Patrick Comiskey, kind of looks like Baker Mayfield out there, grab a picture of him, send it over to the @Four Feathers podcast X account so we can keep an eye on our boy out there. But I was talking with Ron earlier today, Johnny. He said he had cried all of his Patrick Kane tears, so he's along the same lines as you in terms of the Patrick Kane thing. But I still feel just a little bit that he probably would have made sense to be in this group of players. It's here nor there at this point, but it still bothers me a little bit. I don't know if I'll ever 100% be over it, but I don't want to continue to blow hot air on it. But it's unfortunate, I think, is the best way to put it, that he did not finish his career with the Chicago Blackhawks. And I will take that one and run with it forever because of statements that were made.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Totally justified on that front. But anyway, I think that's a good kind of final thought here for season 6, episode 7 of the Four Feathers podcast. This was building character. Hope you built some character along with us here over the airwaves as we did watching the Blackhawks over this past stretch. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet there. Give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. That'll do it for this edition of Four Feathers. Until next time, let's go Hawks.
Go Hawks.